You guys have to accept it. That's right. That's the new security from about a month ago now. Did anybody, from the buyer seller system, any observations there on either sales calls you were on, or maybe just reflecting back on some work that you had been doing?
I thought the
I
pendulum
think it's
conversation was really powerful.
All right, we're going to dig into that. Linda, we are absolutely
Yeah.
going to spend some time there. I feel like we blow through it so quickly and then never get back to it until like 3 months later that we're going to dig into that today. Pete, I'm sorry, jump in.
no problem. I just think, no matter how seasoned anyone is, I think you realize sometimes you don't find yourself in the chase. And you not realize you're chasing maybe too hard or too long. So that always just reminds me when we go through that, I always take a look at the opportunities that I have in the pipeline, and I say, am I in a chase? Because if I am, we need to figure this out.
Well, listen, I think that we've done really deep dives into the buyer seller system where we really peeled back the onion to say, what does each one of those steps look like from a buyer standpoint and the seller standpoint, what happens. But I think that what you just said is really the biggest takeaway. Am I chasing? It starts with giving up too much information early, but every deal that you work on, whether it's in your pipeline or you're on the call, is to avoid the chase. And really what that means is that prospect on your calendar moving forward? And you guys, as you guys start to get a little bit more acclimated and start calling in, hey Dave, I've got a sales call. You will always, and by the way, Robert is an advocate of this at this point. Robert will absolutely agree. Every call should end with a next calendar meeting. I mean, Robert has immediately put that into practice. And if you're doing that, Pete, and everybody, that's going to start to break apart who's your prospect versus who's not your prospect. And then you'll see some people will go on your calendar and then they'll say, hey, we got to cancel or we got to do this and I'll get back to you. There's that signal again of the chase. And that's really one of the biggest key components here is salespeople love to chase prospects for whatever reason. And I think Samir's smiling. I think salespeople believe that there's some sort of tactic that they can employ to get that person back on track, when the reality is just keep them on track right from the get-go. If you can do that, you'll be spending the right amount of time with the right people. As simple as that sounds. Love it, Pete. Anybody else? Any other takeaways, thoughts? We're going to get into pendulum theory. Who wants to explain the pendulum? No, I won't do that to you guys. Yeah, I will do a deeper dive into the pendulum theory today. It's funny because we tend to try to move quickly to give as much substance, but the whole Sandler process is really, it bakes in the pendulum theory throughout the entire process. And I think if we can create that awareness, I think that's really beneficial. On the flip side, and I'd love for you guys, we'll do some practice here today. Keep trying it at home, like doing things that are counterintuitive and see what type of responses you get. So no lie, you can call them out next week. Bob is on vacation this week. Bob sent me a note 2 days after our call. And I'm not going to get it quick enough. This is 6/26, so I forget the date of our last class. Dave, I tried I don't know if you can help me at a Hilton and just got upgraded an early check-in. My girlfriend was thoroughly not helped, so I took a stab. So just wanted to thank you. So I thought that was hysterical. I said we get those notes pretty frequently when people are traveling. Hey, you probably can't help me, and they inevitably will help you. You probably can't do this for me. They will consistently do that. So let me share my screen here. I'll go back to basic. And this is a much better picture than what I drew a couple weeks ago. By the way, before we start diving in here, any questions? Anybody have anything that they're stuck on, or any questions from the last week or two? I know I do a lot of talking, but my objective is to get you guys talking. It takes a couple of weeks. Don't worry, we'll get there. So this is, and I believe we sent out the slides. So this is a great, I don't tell people to print too much stuff. You really don't need to print too much. This will all start to become second nature. This is a good one to keep maybe at your desk for a short while. It kind of gives you the markers on where the prospect is in the conversation. And who remembers what the rule is about how we operate within this pendulum?
Never
get
be more
between your
positive.
prospect and, sorry.
No,
And so-
Bob, I'm sorry, Doug, you go. Doug, go, and then Noel.
Never get between wherever your prospect is and sold.
Perfect, Noel.
I was just gonna say, never be more positive than your client is.
Awesome. Those are great little. By the way, how silly is that statement? Never get more excited than your prospect. I mean, that's really, it's like, it's so counterintuitive, because I work with a lot of financial advisors, and their objective was to get as riled up as the prospect, get their heads shaking, and we're gonna pull the rug out from under these folks gently. We're not gonna injure them in any way. Any other takes on what Noel or Doug just said?
I think they nailed it.
All right, Samir, how you doing? All right.
Yep.
All right, good. All right, so here's what I'd like to do. Let's, I want to break us into 3 groups. I will, in each of your groups, send you a note, but one group is going to come up with a series of statements. I have to remember Nick and John are in the same room. A series of statements that are on the positive side. One of the groups is going to come up with a series of statements in the neutral space. And one of the groups is going to come up with statements in the negative space that prospects would use. That's all we're going to do. We're going to spend a couple minutes. I'll send you out to some breakout rooms, and we're going to, let me just do a couple things here. So I'm going to send you out to 3 breakout rooms. One group is going to be positive, one is going to be neutral, one is going to be negative. And it's what a prospect might say in each of those groups. I will send a message into each of those groups to alert you which group you are in, because it's going to randomly do it. In that group, there's going to be one note taker. The note taker will be the person whose birthday is closest to today. It could be previous or going forward, but it's the closest to today. And Doug's smiling because his birthday might be today. He's like, my birthday is exactly 6 months ago. All right. I will send you out to 3 breakout rooms, and then I'll very quickly send a note into those. And I'll give you about 3 minutes to be there. I'll put a timer up, and I'll probably bounce into 1 or 2 of the rooms real quickly. All right. You're getting sent out right now.
I've never done a breakout rooms or anything I need to know or do.
Nothing you need to do, Robert. It will. The only thing is, on the way back, it'll ask you to leave the room, and eventually it'll time you out and send you back to the main room. So you might have to do 1 click to come back here.
Okay.
Ah, it looks like we're the only ones here.
That's the first time I've ever done a breakout room. That was pretty cool.
I like that a lot.
Looks like you're on mute, Dave.
Is that better?
Yes.
Well, that's the first time that the instructor has muted himself. Couldn't figure out that I was muted. I was looking for my headset because every once in a while my the speaker will go out, but usually only when I use Teams. So my apologies. Nora, can you hear me, Nora?
Yes.
You were in the positive statement room. What were some of the positive statements that you heard?
Oh, I got this, Nora. Don't worry. I wrote it all down. So we heard, so the three that we had were, this is great. This sounds great. Let's talk to management, which was a little bit less positive, but still positive. And then let's figure out how to do this.
Now, I'm not going to get too far into the weeds because we really could spend a ton of time digging into this. These statements will come at different times during the sales process. Some of them come a little bit earlier, some can come a little bit later, and sometimes they're not at the right time. So it really, we can talk about these and where might you hear that, and then we can talk about how maybe to respond to them. When we think of some of these positive statements, so by the way, who as a salesperson loves to hear, this is great? I mean, we all love to hear this is great. When we hear that really early in the sales process, what do you think happens to most salespeople? Not you guys, but the other people.
They jump the gun and let's get a scope together. Let's get this going. Maybe they don't think through the needs, the actual needs and challenges of the prospect because you get such a positive statement in the beginning.
If I get that positive statement early, Pete, life is great. I can just skip everything that I know about selling and just jump right to the conclusion. How quick can I get you a proposal? Actually, let's put that into the mix. Samir, you had that on your list, right?
Yeah.
All right. Can you send me a proposal?
Always
I mean, what's that?
that always like literally goes from this is great. Can you send me a proposal? And then that's it.
Yeah, and that's why we all have 100% close rates.
Yeah. And then it just disappears. It goes into the black box of doom.
Ding, ding, ding. So guys, if you can give me a week, I just need to read the next chapter in my training manual just to see how we're going to handle these because these are a little tricky. So when we hear this is great, How would you respond to it? Anybody jump in. So, or Samir, if you want to take the lead on this, how would you handle that?
I mean, I don't handle it well, which is why I'm doing it. I definitely, me personally ends up jumping the gun and being like, cool, let's get a proposal together and let's get started.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to not get excited when the client or the prospect is excited.
Yeah. In our earlier session, we were talking about IR theory. That's probably a new term because I think it's a Sandler term. It means how do I feel about my identity and how do I feel about my role? And one of Sandler's motives, one of his moves was you need to be separated from the role that you play as a salesperson and really be almost like an independent observer in the room. And that allows us to do some of these things, almost be, we can't be emotionally attached to the outcome. And you're right, Samir, when somebody gets excited, we as salespeople, I know when we're about to close a piece of business, my feet get excited, the whole body language is, and Sandler's really teaching us not to let yourself go there. So if you hear this is great, let's imagine you hear it almost at any point in the sales process. What would you throw out to a prospect? What would be the Sandler response to this?
What would you,
Okay.
what do you think is great about it? You would ask a question concerning their statement.
Love it. Noelle, jump in here.
I was going to say the same thing, just kind of from what you talked about last week, being like, I'm happy that you think it's great. Can you let me know maybe what you're most excited about, or, something to make them talk more about what they think is so great.
Or how does this currently align? Maybe depending on where the conversation is, how does this currently align with your needs and challenges?
Ooh, I like that. That's awesome because that, by the way, all three are awesome. Let's also be, let me make sure I state this, and I'll state it thousands of times. We do not script. We will talk about talk tracks and things like that. We're talking technique because not every prospect has the script to work from. So they're going to say things differently. So what we want to learn is the technique. All of these are home run responses. Every one of them. Every one of them causes the prospect to defend their position. That's ultimately what we're looking for. In that case, who is actually doing the selling? The buyer.
They are real. Yeah.
It's like you just took that tennis ball, Pete, and went boom, right back to the other side of the court and said, and I don't want us to think that we're trying to be cute here. We're not trying to be cute or, undermining. These are unfair advantages. That's really what we are getting here. So all of these will work like a home run. Pete, now that I really don't like the other ones, I really like what you said, because now they've really got to go into an intellectual space, which would cause them to say, well, wait a second, we have some other, maybe I learn about some other timing or some other things, or how this does complement some other things that are going on. This is awesome. Any other thoughts with this one? I think we'd all agree we're operating behind the pendulum here.
Did you ask them what they?
Oh, I cut someone off.
I was going to say, for this is great. Could you say, what do you feel the next steps are, or the next appropriate steps are?
John, I like it, especially at the end of a sales call, where, and at Sandler, we typically don't have a closing technique. We have one, and it doesn't even come at the back end of the sale. But every once in a while, you have to tip the prospect to go forward. And, Doug and I are having a great conversation. We're kind of at the back end of the sales call, and Doug says, hey, look, this all sounds great. Really liking what I'm hearing. Great, Doug. What do you think we should do next? There's let him make the buying decision. Hey, I need a couple of days to think about it. Hey, can you send me a proposal? He can define what the next step is. And if it fits into my scope, I'll be cool with it. If it's out of scope, then I can help bring it back in with some other tactics and techniques. John, love it. Great ad. Let's keep moving here. This sounds great. Let's talk to management.
I would say, you know,
This is a
something along
trick
the
one, by the
lines
way,
of, yeah, we're happy that you're going to speak to management about this. What information do you need from me to make that conversation successful?
I would even ask who do you need to present it to? You know, and then lead in with your question, Pete, like who do you need to present it to and what information can I provide to help you present? Do you want me in on that call?
Great. Actually, Linda, I love where you're going. Do you want me in on that call? Do you want me in on that call? By the way, who gets that statement? Obviously, we get it if you threw it out there. Hey, we're going to go to management. And who struggles with that question that Linda just asked, in that it's maybe a little bit pushy?
This is the one that I seem to have encountered the most. The people identify themselves as a decision maker, and then you find out they're not. And, you know, even when you do the upfront contract, you know, you say, okay, listen, can we agree that, you know, however you decide you want to proceed, that we'll make a decision on it this week, you know, something to that effect. And they're like, oh yeah, you know, and then you find out they got to present it to somebody else. And what you thought from the beginning of the meeting was going to be a 2-day decision has now drug out for, you know, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. But I've done the same thing. I basically said the same thing. I said, well, let me do this. If you're going to make a presentation, how about if I, at the very least, make you a series of notes to highlight the bullet points of the reasons why I think this would be good for you. But would it maybe just be better if I were to make the presentation, just in case they have questions that you may not be ready for? Something along that lines is how we did it. And again, black hole, you know, they said, yeah, go ahead and send us the bullet points. That'll be great. So we don't forget anything, you know. So now you got somebody who's not interested and less knowledgeable trying to make the sale on your behalf, which is a waste.
Yeah, so let's thread a few things together, and I'm going to go out just a little bit into the future here. In the next several weeks, what we'll do is we'll hit what we call the decision step, and when we teach you guys that, it will ease the blow here. It'll make this much more. This will occur less and less, and we'll have better tactics and techniques when we get there. So we're going to head in that direction. From here, Robert, you're really, you know, you're hitting on a few of the key elements that we want to make sure we have out there. One is connectivity. So if in fact they're going to management, and I can't speak for everybody here, but I can speak for every other client that we train. When our clients are in front of the decision makers, their close rates are significantly higher. We have one company that actually tracked it. Close rates are 6 times higher when they are in front of the decision maker versus when they don't get in front of the decision maker. 16% versus 86%. Big closing rate difference. So I want to use some data to really try to move this thing forward. So I want to make a suggestion. So I might say, so if Samir said to me, hey, I'm going to run this to management, I might say, hey, Samir, can I make a suggestion? Why don't we do that? Why don't we do that together? Not the greatest choices. That's what I'm going to first go for. Now, is that behind the pendulum? I don't know necessarily if it is, but it's not following their lead, so it might be a little bit counterintuitive. If they say yes to that, then I'm home free. I'm going to put that on my calendar. If they say no to that, then again, a little bit more behind the pendulum is where I want to steal from Robert. Why don't we do this? Here's what I typically do. Why don't I prepare you for some of those notes, for some of those questions that they may have? So prepare them. These are not great. I'll clean these up and get them out. Doug's going, this makes no freaking sense to me.
Well, would you also maybe ask, you know, what kinds of questions will this management person have that maybe I haven't answered for you yet? Something along those lines to help figure out what that person's, like, to me, this is a pause question. Like, oh, let me take it to management. It's because we haven't really gotten them to the point I don't always necessarily take it that I've completely sold you. It's a pause. It's like, give me some space. I need to kind of noodle this through. So if they say they need to go to management, would it be appropriate or a Sandler way to say, like, what kind of questions do you think he'll be asking that maybe we haven't talked about yet?
Ding, 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 ding. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely the path that I want to take, but I want to do it in multiple steps, Linda.
Okay.
I shouldn't say,
Okay.
but I want to take what you said and do it in multiple steps for the goal of somebody might say, so I could say, hey, suggest, typically I go on those calls. There's step one. If they say no, hey, typically when you don't bring me in, here's what I like to do is I like to prepare you with some notes. So can you and I get together and have that conversation? Step two, yes, we can do that. Step three, who will be in the room? Oh, it's going to be Doug, Linda, and Robert. Terrific. What do you think Doug will say? What do you think Linda will ask? What do you think Robert will say? Peeling back the onion. Behind the pendulum. Linda, can I ask you a question? What happens if they tell you that this is not a good idea? So there's my behind the pendulum. So all of this is building blocks to try to pull out some of that other information. All really, I wouldn't say heavy behind the pendulum, but counterintuitive. We're going to keep peeling back the onion here. Let me hit the pause button. Let me just make sure that this is resonating, makes sense to everybody here. Because we're doing a pretty good, this is a pretty deep dive into this stuff. Nora, are you good? I gotta make sure. Doug, you're good? Making some sense? Okay. And the key here, Linda, to your point, it should trigger our brains to say, I got to ask another series of questions. Now, the ultimate next step is, let's imagine we get shut down. Robert, I get shut down from this prospect that I'm dealing with, who is not the key decision maker because they told me. What am I going to make sure I have with those folks?
Another appointment.
Next appointment schedule.
My next appointment. So Samir, when you go back and talk, when do you think you're going to talk to them, Samir?
I'm gonna talk to them soon.
Soon is when, this week, next week?
Usually I try and do at least 1 week, like 7 days.
Okay, so why don't we do this, Samir? Why don't we get at our calendars and the end of next week, you and I get a debriefing appointment set up so we can talk about exactly what happened. Not, again, not necessarily super behind the pendulum, but counterintuitive. Most salespeople leave that to chance. Okay, can you call me after that meeting occurs and let me know what happened? And then what happens?
Gone.
They're gone.
They're gone.
And it's not that they're bad people. They've got so many priorities that if we don't keep them on, in this threaded line, they can drift away from us. So we're kind of threading a few things together here. All right. I couldn't see what I was typing, so I think we're in good shape. Can you send me a proposal? All right, it could occur anywhere in the sales process. What happens when you get, can you send me a proposal? How do you handle that?
You could ask, what details would you like in the proposal?
I can send you on what details would you like? Love it, John. John's oh, sorry, go ahead, Pete.
No, I was gonna say, on top of that, on top of the details, what are your budgetary constraints? What do you have, for budget for something like this? I always use, Dave, I've been using this for a while now since our first training session. A lot of our clients are very reluctant to do that. So I've been using the range tactic that you told us a while back, and it works almost every time. Every single,
how often, wait, hold on. Pete, one second. How often does it work?
Every time. It works every time.
I wasn't sure if I heard you right. First one.
Yeah, it works because they have a budget in mind, right? So, well, is it something like 30 to 40,000, 50 to 60,000, 80 to 100? Whoa, it's not 100,000. It's definitely going to be. And you'll get a reaction. I've gotten a reaction every single time I've used it. So now you have an idea that you need to keep your SOW or tactics or whatever you're proposing under 100 grand.
I'm going to take you a little bit out of context. But I love what you just said. And, you know, if I'm asked to put together a proposal, by the way, quick show of hands, who's ever put together a proposal for a prospect and you were guessing at the budget? Like you were like, Doug, that hand went up way too fast.
I had somebody tell me what their budget was, but then the end result was so much lower that, you know,
Okay.
I have, you know, 65,000 and they ended up spending, you know, less than 10. And you're like, we built to the budget kind of thing. And it was, you know, so it's kind of, I've actually implemented Pete's kind of range, like, you know, you have to kind of know what the value of your services are too. Like, you don't want to go in on 30 to 40,000 if you know that that's way too low. But I just find that sometimes even getting the budget, it turns out to be, you know.
We will get you guys to a place again, the budget and the decision, we'll get there. Don't worry. And I think what you guys are bringing up is awesome. If you're putting together a proposal and you're guessing, and when I say guessing, you're putting in a number that has not been agreed upon, the number should never be a surprise. And take that a little bit of tongue in cheek. It's not an absolute. It should never be a surprise to your prospect. Sometimes it's rare that maybe that'll happen. But I can say, again, Samir, I'll pick on you, just the way I moved you, you're right in the center. If Samir says, send me a proposal, hey, Samir, happy to send your proposal. Before I put it together, can we spend a few minutes? Because I don't have a dollar investment in here for you. And we really need to figure that out before we put it together. That is behind the pendulum. That is, again, because what I'm doing is I'm drawing the prospect into a deeper conversation. I really don't want to go back and forth. We work with a company that does thousands of proposals a year. And by doing this, we've reduced their proposal count significantly by saying, hey, look, before we send your proposal, we have to agree upon the numbers. Because when they don't agree upon the numbers, that proposal goes back and forth 3 or 4 times. And then it becomes a negotiation, and then we lost track of really what we were trying to do. And the idea isn't to outdo your prospect. The idea is to come up with a number that works for them and works for you. That's ultimately what
I think the biggest, I think our most favorite statement, I can only speak on behalf of me and my colleagues at Artcraft, that we love getting the most, and I'm being facetious, is, well, we don't want to limit your creativity. So we're not going to give you a budget at the moment. Well, you know, we don't want to build a $500,000 program for you that you can't afford. You know, so we try to come back with, we get that all the time. I don't know, Noel, if you get that on your end too, but we don't want to limit your creativity. All right, well, you obviously we need to fit this into some type of budget. So I try to push back in the most professional way that I can when I get a response like that.
Love
It's
it.
funny because we got the opposite. What's the least amount that I need to be successful?
Yeah.
It's weird because on clinical, we don't typically ask for budgets. And I don't know, if we're like talking to someone on the phone, we tell them what we can do, then they ask us for a proposal. I don't know. It's on big trials, we really don't even ask them for budgets. We just go back and tell them how much it is, and we usually have pretty good return, like approvals on it. So that's not something that I've even heard Todd ever say on a call. I don't know if clinical trials are different than brand, but I've never actually heard that before.
Yeah, I do believe that they have a little bit more wiggle room on those. That's my understanding. I could be wrong. The key here is, again, we're staying behind the pendulum. We're not going to send a proposal that's premature. It's not ready to go out just yet. It's used, again, step 2 of the prospect system is to gather your information. The moment you give them the proposal without any, accountability back to them, we lose them. Nick and John, your world is a little bit different. Somebody's got some water in their basement. We're not going to ask them how much they're willing to invest in all likelihood. But we're picking and choosing which steps are most appropriate. If you're doing a big corporate cleaning, at $100,000, then we're talking budget. We're having this conversation. So the application here might be a little bit different for you guys in a couple of cases.
And a lot of times people just use their insurance company, so they're gonna pay $500 for the deductible anyway, so they don't care how much it costs.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's covered by insurance, so it doesn't matter. I would also like, can you send me a proposal? I could, but it's not gonna have all the right information in it. Or I don't send them until we've completed certain things. You can guide them. As we learn more about the process, that'll fit more in, be much more relevant. For now, let's jump ahead to, I think it was Doug and Noel had the neutral statements, the 6 o'clock statement. Do I have that right?
Yes, yes. So things that we came up with were things like, I want to move forward, but I have to run it by my boss, which we just kind of talked about. So I think that's probably in the gray area between positive and neutral. Is that fair?
Yep.
I might be interested in a later date. I want to do it, but I need some more data. How much is it going to cost me? We won't be able to do it until next year.
Try to drag that.
Did I miss anything, Noel?
Nope, I think you got them all. Good note taker.
Thank you.
These are great. Yeah, these are great. I want to move forward, but it very much fits in the top one. I think we can probably gloss over this first one because, again, it sits right in that neutral space. Hey, I want to move forward, but I need someone else's approval. It might almost be a little bit of an indicator that there's a hidden no in there. That's like the old, I need to check with my spouse on this one. So we're probably pretty cool with this. I might be interested, but it's sometime in the future. How would you handle that one?
I think with a lot of these, you just like, I mean, the approach that I take with some of these, I'm just going to go off camera really quick. Sorry, my dog needs to go out. I always try to get something calendared. If I get a response like that, great. Totally understand. Why don't we chat why don't we chat in the next month or two? Does that sound good? And then I just continually add touch points with the client to try to continue to build the relationship, to stay in front of them, to be relevant. I mean, I try to do that if I get responses like some of that.
Yeah, I think, Pete, you can navigate through the sales process. If they give you a date down the road, you can navigate to that to kind of hold them accountable. So what Pete is saying, let's imagine, Doug, you said I'd like to buy from you, but probably around the December timeframe. I might say, why'd you pick that date? Why, what's so relevant about December? No problem. You could defend it, or I could call you out and say, well, that's a little bit of BS. But if you're committed to December, which is legit, people have dates down the road. There are competing priorities. Then my move is to leverage my upfront contract by creating clear next steps. So if I can create clear next steps and navigate and say, hey, Doug, if it's December, that makes the most sense. Here's what we typically do. How about early August, you and I get together for a 10-minute check-in and blah, blah, blah. I want to draw him back in to create accountability. And again, not lose him to potentially some abyss that's out in the space out there in the ether.
Well, what about if they're saying that at a later date, but if they're saying a later date, but what they're really saying is, I'm not sure about this. I'm insecure about the process. This is going too fast. Or, if they're starting to freak out a little bit and they use that as an excuse, that's a different than the legit, I can't do this till December.
I let you guys play around with that one. That's what immediately came to my mind. Not, again, a couple of typos there. But hey, Doug, I understand December. Let me ask you a question. Is there something that's making you uncomfortable with what we're talking about right now?
I think also with that statement, there's the timeline selling play, right? If what are you looking to, maybe you have a general idea on what they're doing or what they want to do. Then you can kind of start having discussions with them about timing. Well, a program like this could take anywhere from 3 to 5 months. I know this is a blanket statement, but the sooner we can get started, the better. Or something along those lines. You start talking about timelines. Maybe you can, if they want a delivery date of December, then we would have to work backwards from that.
Sure. And I think Pete and Doug, like where Doug's coming from is, I think we need to be able to sense, is there a little bit of a holdback here? if, you know, we call it reading the situation. If I notice that someone was a little bit uncomfortable, I might not say anything. And being a little bit counterintuitive, you know, as a salesperson, and maybe I don't want to challenge, but I want to nurture my prospect and say, hey, look it, I can understand you're picking that date. Is that because you're unsure of my process, you know, or you're a little bit uncomfortable, or is that, you know, are there competing priorities? I want to nurture them to figure out which one of those buckets is it. But I think that neutral prospect, Doug, you raise a good point. It could be maybe we're moving at a pace quicker than them. We need to be able to identify what's going on there. And if we get too excited, then they are going to feel pushed. And we are not pushing prospects, we are pulling them. We let them drive the process. Love it, love it. Any other thoughts here on the neutrals?
If they say that it's a competing initiative, that's kind of putting it on the back burner, is there, I mean, other than trying to get it on the calendar, is there something else that we could say or do to kind of uncover, you know, how this might dovetail or something along those lines? Move it up further in the calendar?
Well, I think the question becomes, Linda, is understanding why they've selected a particular date. And then there's a whole series of other questions we could ask to validate that. And I'll rattle them off. Don't write them down. We'll get to this. But something like, you know, Samir picked, he wants to do this in January. Hey, Samir, why'd you pick that date? What happens if we miss January? Is there an opportunity that if it got done earlier, would that be a benefit? So we can develop other questions to really help him intellectually validate his decision-making process there. On another, you know, on another level, there's the opportunity when you're dealing with larger deals, more, I wouldn't even say more enterprise, but more complex. Like we have a couple of different marketing folks here. There are going to be competing priorities. You know, companies have other initiatives that they need to pay attention to before they do something maybe that you deliver. If you
It's actually
can build
interesting.
that,
Sorry,
go ahead,
David, to cut you off. Like it's interesting you say that. So a lot of times we'll get the let's talk about this in X, Y, and Z day because our existing agency's contract expires then. And so what we'll actually tell them is, hey, we should start 30 days before that contract ends so that we have time to ramp up and we can have that like conversation with them to help them move up some of the dates.
Absolutely. And what you have to become is that trusted advisor. You really have to build enough rapport with them so that they say, you know what, Samir, that makes absolute sense. So not only do we have to have the courage to have that conversation, because sometimes we'll just let it slip. Oh, we'll call you when the contract expires. And salespeople are walking out going, awesome. But if we don't have that trusted advisor conversation, we might lose any momentum that we've gained. So you got to have courage to ask the question and then ask or make those correct statements to them so that they buy into the process. Makes absolute sense. Robert, I think that fits in your world too.
Yeah, everybody makes decisions. They always shop. Nobody does anything in December. Everybody kind of gets slow moving out of the gate in January, but everybody makes their decisions prior to hurricane season. So you can still close deals after hurricane season, but your opportunity window seems to close the closer you get to June.
There you go. And we can use our data. Hey, here's what happens if we don't do these certain things. Let me share with you what happens if we don't do it this way. It's not going to work. We're not going to get the business. Those are all behind the pendulum statements. So those all play out. Any questions before we jump into negative? And we'll move pretty quickly in the negative because I did want to hit, we're never going to get to upfront contracts, but we will hit the sub. I want to hit the sub one more time, or the system one more time before we wrap up. Who had negative? Keith.
Yep.
Pete, you're the man.
So real quick, as we were going through this, it was you start to realize of how many negative statements you actually get as a salesperson. So it's a little deflating at times, but maybe that's what makes this job so fun. I don't know. Just throwing that out there. So we have several. I'll just kind of fire some off here. We don't have a need for your services at this time. We are not ready to take that action yet. please take me off your list. The timing isn't right. This doesn't align with our budgetary needs. The good old, the hard click, the good old getting hung up on. I'm sure everyone's experienced that. We have chosen another company for this work. I've never heard of your company before, things like that.
Ah. Let's take one. We have no need for this. Who wants to handle that? What's behind the pen? What's behind the pendulum there? Nora.
Is this,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, is this after we've already talked to them or before? Because if they said we don't have need for this, but you already had uncovered some of their pain points, you could, say back to them, well, when we had talked, you said that you had XYZ. So kind of just throwing their words back in their face.
Absolutely. Later on in the sales call, again, these can come up at all different times. So later on in the sales call, especially when you've had that conversation where you know that they need your help, and then they say, you know what, we really have no need right now. Hey, I'm surprised because when we were talking earlier, here were a couple of the things that I heard from you. Noel, spot on, love it. Early on, you're on an initial phone call, you really haven't even had a conversation. They say, you know what, we have no need for this. How do you handle that?
How do you know without allowing me to talk to you about the company or what we offer?
How do you know? We really haven't spoken. By the
If
way,
I'm in
go, Pete.
sorry, I was gonna say if we're in a capabilities presentation possibly, and you get a phrase like that, I would typically say, well, this is just a small sample size, a small snapshot of what we can do. What I'd like to do is work to align with your needs and challenges, and then we can build something custom that aligns with those, or something along those lines. What are your needs, basically?
Okay, Pete, I'm going to pick on you for a second. That sounds a little bit more positive. That sounds like we're moving a little bit more salesy. So positive may not be the right term. That sounds a little salesy. What might be a little bit more negative there?
I was going to say something, maybe if you've done research on the company and you've seen, like, just for instance, like from just thinking about for me in clinical trials, you've seen that they've been, they started their recruitment period a year ago, but it still says they're actively recruiting. Or if you see something in the news that it's been delayed, you can say something on the lines of, well, when I was like researching your company, I saw that, you've been recruiting or you're falling behind on recruitment needs or something. And then maybe bring up something that we could do to help them, or I don't know, just trying to think, like, if you research something.
Yeah, it's almost like you can find another issue, but let's go really behind the pendulum there. Let's go really negative. Hey, we don't have a need for any of this stuff. Now,
I'm curious, why do you think that?
I'm curious, why do you think that? I mean, we can add some drama to it, and we could say, well, it's probably more dramatic if we were doing it in person, but I could say, hey, listen, maybe we should wrap up the phone call now. Because I'm curious why you invited me in. So yeah, Doug, absolutely. That's Pete and Noel, you guys are in the right space. It just has a little bit more of a salesy sense to it. When we go a little bit more negative, it starts to call out the prospect to have to defend their position here. Nora, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say my response usually to the not interested statement, or to, I just simply say, so how'd you get to be so lucky? And I just zip it after, and then they start talking, and some of them laugh, some of them, just to say the real reasons behind being not interested, so that we start having a conversation and start asking questions after.
Yeah.
One thing I've never actually said, but I've often thought is, and something like that, they're like, well, we've kind of already made the selection for this year, but we'll keep you in mind if something happens or if somebody doesn't make it, if they fall behind or something. And my thought's always been, well, you must have had some reason to believe that you had a need. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking right now. And that's some, I've never called them out on it, but I've always thought that's like, well, then why are we talking? If you're good to go and you don't need anybody, then why are we talking? Why are we're wasting each other's time then? Why did we even set this meeting?
Absolutely, Robert. Fits right in there.
You
Absolutely.
also ask, like, are you really willing to stunt your growth or your progress?
Listen, that's a lot of guts. So you just everybody else on the phone just went, oh my God, I would never say that. But again, that is way behind the pendulum. We just gotta have guts to say some of these things. It's also about how we build to that. Sometimes it's about how we build it. I like where Robert and Doug are coming from. It's again a little bit counterintuitive. Then why'd you even take the meeting? Why'd you take the call with us? What is it you were hoping to gain? Doug, do you have a question? You look like you're deep in thought. All right, we're gonna start losing everybody. I will actually record a quick video for you guys on the Sandler process, just to point out that the whole process is designed to stay behind the pendulum throughout the entire sales process. So even if you're using some of what we've got here, this is awesome. This is great technique. Start to put this into your arsenal. You'll find your voice. John is the gutsiest one of all of us, apparently. So he's also from New Jersey. Not that I'm from New Jersey, but he's from New Jersey. So you can see the Jersey coming out of him. But we'll find our voice. But the process will force us behind the pendulum as we go through it. So that's the system does it for you. So it almost prevents you from getting too far ahead of yourself as we're going through the selling process. Let me hit stop share. I know a couple of people needed to drop, and